Hi, and welcome to All the Woo A to Z. We're your hosts, Suzanne.
And Mychal, and this is season 2. Hello, I'm Mychal, and I've recently been playing audio engineer.
I'm Suzanne, and as the technician, it appears that the effect of all the screws in the audio interface was kind of like having a too tight bra on.
Apparently,
And so we took them off.
just needed to breathe a little bit. So we're rolling with it.
So we have such a special episode
Yes.
in store for you.
So this is All the Woo, A to Z, and we're always going to tell you that these are just our own insights, understandings, opinions on all of these topics. But now we have an extra person to
Who's
include.
an expert.
Yes, exactly. That being said, we just hope that you're entertained.
So what are we drinking tonight?
So tonight we are going to do the House of Brown chilled red blend. So this is a chillable red. So the reason why we're picking this is because, well, it comes from California, specifically Lodi, California. But all this to say, pairing is because we have a guest today, and on the top capsule of the bottle, it says welcome. So this is a welcome to our guest. And also because this is different for us at this moment in time, we hope to have many more. This being our first guest, I wanted to have a wine that was a little bit outside of the box, a little bit different than what we normally do. And a chillable red is exactly that. So this is literally, you can just put it in the fridge and enjoy it cold. It's lighter. It is a blend. It has Cabernet Sauvignon, Pinot Noir, and Tempranillo in there. But with all of those grapes, depending on how familiar you are with wine, you would think that it's a big, heavy red. It's not. It's actually light and refreshing, more like a Pinot Noir, which is one of the reasons why chilling it works. Also, on the cover of it, it has a picture of a lady who has her hand kind of up. And so that is a little bit of the lead-in for what we are going to be talking about today, because our guest is an expert in, correct me if I'm getting this wrong, Suzanne, chirology?
Chirology,
Yes.
which we are doing as H for hands.
H for hands.
So
finally, we promised you that we had something in the works, and we're finally delivering on that promise.
We had to get our hands around it. Boom, boom.
Yeah.
So we would like to welcome Kimberly McGaw, and she is at kimberlymcgaw.com, which is, I will put it in the notes, but that is MCGAW.
Yes.
And she is so delightful. And we are so excited to have her here and just full of information and warm and great stories. And so, yeah, let's just take it away, pour our glasses of welcome, and ready to go.
All right.
Hi, we are here with chirologist Kimberly McGaw. And what is a chirologist, you might ask? And I'm going to leave that up to her to explain, but we'll say it this way. She read my palms and told me about myself. So, what is a chirologist, Kimberly?
How would you describe it in your own words?
I think it's, technically it means, chiro is hand.
Mm-hmm.
So think about a chiropractor. It's
working with her hands.
Yeah, working with her hands. So it is the study or wisdom of the hands, and I tend to go with the latter.
Okay.
And what I call myself chirologist versus, a lot of people might say palmist,
Mm-hmm.
and that's still, if I'm using colloquialism, I'll put palmist like on a card or something.
Yes.
But it's the entire hand that you study. The palm has probably some of the least information, or it's the, in terms of if you're going through importance, once you get to the palm, your fingers and your hand shape have much more to do than, there's so much more information there. Your fingerprints, the marks on your, on your palms, in
Mhm.
addition to that, in addition to your, which kind of, they're kind of palmar markings, but also, yeah, just your digit length, your ratio, the overall shape, these play into, and even your fingernails, very important when it gets to medical palmistry. That's why you see a lot of, for example, a lot of, like, you're in a hospital, they don't want you to wear nail polish because they want to be able
Yeah.
to look at the health of your
Mhm.
nails.
I've seen a lot of naturopathic doctors who the same thing. Like, first of all, they don't like it that I wear nail polish in the first place, just because of things that get soaked in through the nails. But beyond that, that saying that it's a way for them, so many different things can help diagnose health based upon just looking at your nail beds and how your nails are naturally. And he says there's cheater ways to look then at toenails if you can't look at your fingernails. But anyway, not to hijack the conversation with that. But yes, that
Yeah,
is not the first time I've heard that. So makes sense.
yeah, yeah. Sorry, yeah, and it predates, what I like about it, this predates astrology.
Oh,
Ooh.
wow.
Yeah, 'cause people probably were looking at their hands before the stars,
I
so
mean,
that's a
makes sense.
fair
It's right in
point.
front of you. So,
Mhm, mhm,
Can focus
mhm.
on it almost no matter what kind of lens you have.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
yeah, mhm.
What made you want to get into this? S-
Science
Yeah,
study.
their study. Yeah, I'm like, what is the right
Yeah,
term here?
yeah.
Yes.
There are 2 doors to this. The first is, I'm adopted, so I didn't know if I had, with astrology, you have to have your exact time of birth
Hmm.
and
Right.
location, and they can fudge it a little bit when you're adopted. You don't know if what you have is the correct certificate, and even then, and I've always liked that, but the other, so that's that point, that kind of interest, or just on, always want to know more about myself. You know,
Hmm.
Sure.
I'm totally into woo. I'll take any form of just
Woo!
self knowledge, any
Yay!
kind of, yeah. But you're gonna laugh. The other one was, I was at the, years ago, I was trying to get into comedy at the time and doing improv, studying at Second City,
Oh,
and I
wow.
was, trying to make it, in acting, and couldn't take regular, full-time jobs at the time. And I went in for a go see for a commercial, and they noticed my hands, and they said, "Hey, you've got great hands. Do you quote unquote want a hand job?" Like, so they sent me on. I ended up becoming a hand model.
Oh,
So I ended up becoming
wow.
getting paying my bills for a couple of years, mainly as a hand model. The full David Duchovny, George Costanza thing. I've
Yeah.
heard them all, but it was amazing. Where I had to watch it. Watch the hands. But then what's fascinating is, once you do that, when you're sitting there in a set. And I think my big moment was when I was on a commercial set. I noticed, different agency would hire me because they'd write a certain commercial and they bring hands in. It wasn't just jewelry. It might be like, uh, you know, McDonald's or something. You're turning the cup, and you're
Hmm.
just
Oh,
sitting on a
wow.
set. And every time, but I noticed that every time they brought, like, I think I work with Leah Burnett and some other agencies, and some nationals just came to Chicago to shoot. And I remember that I looked over and I noticed the writers always had the same hands, same kinds of hands. The account executives, who are the kind of the salespeople, the client facing people, always had the same types of hands. And
Hmm.
photographers tended to have a certain shape of hands. And it was just
That
interesting
is
that certain roles,
fascinating.
because you're sitting there for hours, right, just staring out, with your hands unable to really do anything. And so I ADD, and I had to entertain myself. So I was watching that, and then I remember getting on, the 151 bus in Chicago and taking it back. And I noticed we started out like on LaSalle Street in the financial district, where they had the traders. If you got on with the traders, they had really short hands, short little stubby fingers or whatever. And then if you got closer to Northwestern Law School, the lawyers tend to have really long fingers.
Hmm.
Um, and then same thing with, if you went by the hospital, kind of just going down the way, I started noticing that certain professions had, that kind of carried on.
Yeah.
Oh,
And so I just became,
wow.
so it was, and also when you're in the business, you start everyone's competition. So when you're checking out hands, when you start checking out hands, it becomes your obsession. And so I remember just kind of really kind of fascinated me, and I started going to bookstores and collecting, all the palmistry books I could get, which were mostly from the Victorian era. I
Oh,
have
wow.
a great collection of books going way, way back. Just trying to teach myself, because there were no, like, local teachers at the time and just became, I was just kind of self-taught for many years.
Yeah.
But that's what kind of drove it. And then, yeah, and then it's funny, and that became my thing where I also, I guess I developed a hand fetish. But once you see things, and here's something else too, is when you're in, I did notice that people, you can put in a poker face, but hands never lie because
Mm-hmm.
people are so
Oh.
focused on their verbal expression. So I started noticing hands. I also think hands are a great indicator of people because it's very, Mies van der Rohe, God is in the details.
Yeah.
So a lot of
Mhm.
people might put on some really, but if someone like, if a man has beautifully manicured hands, or if somebody just pays attention to the details or, even a ring or even what finger you're wearing a ring on, that makes a difference. So I just
Mm-hmm.
noticed that hands are that little it's a very intimate piece that we get to see in people. So I think I just became a hand watcher. But that was kind of my
I
side door initially. Yeah.
As a so I used to be a professional ballet and modern dancer, and with that, I do the same thing but with feet. And I know that sounds like
Oh,
I same thing, like I have a foot fetish, which I don't. I find feet fascinating, and I'm able to through people's shoes. I know it's a weird question that I'll sometimes ask
absolutely.
people and be like, "Do you have high arches? Because you look like you have high arches." And then they'll be like, "Yeah, I think so." And they don't exactly know what I mean because they're not paying attention to their feet that much. But as a dancer, I look at people's feet and I'm very envious, especially people who have high arches. I'm like, man, that
Uh,
must be amazing. But I have also, for hands, I was always taught that paying attention to your hands being well manicured and looking up close, partly because I worked in restaurants for so many years that you
mhm.
putting your hands in front of people's faces, that they're hyper focused on your hands that closely, that it was always really important. That's always why I would wear some kind of bling bling ring for people to look at when my hand is there, that my nails are always done, that my nail polish is never chipped, like all of those kinds of things, because I figured that somebody was looking at my hands. So, which you kind of answered this question, but kind of not. Since you are looking at people's hands all the time, do you use maybe not 100% consciously, but do you find that then your assessment, a quick assessment of somebody's hands will inform you about that person a bit?
Absolutely. I'm hand biased. I own up to it.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because I also teach a class at Rice University now just as an adjunct. And it's funny, my old write-up students, by the way, I've worn, when I was a hand model, we wore ballet slipper pink, and then the other one was red coat red, like they wanted certain colors.
Hmm.
Mhm.
And but I always have, you see right now, my
Yes.
trademark is I always have red nails, and it's always and it's like what Opie, yeah, Big Apple Red. They know
Oh,
me.
yeah.
And
Uh,
but I'm saying that yes, I absolutely do. Like so, I am hand biased, and actually, I've gotten paid recently as a consultant, where I watch actually some people. I do look at hands. Actually, I've done team building actually with hands.
Oh,
So I've
oh,
done team building
wow.
for TikTok, for Neiman's, and then actually the person introduced me to Suzanne.
hmm.
Uh,
Ah,
he's a film producer, and whenever he brings people on deck, he comps them a hand reading, and then I look at their hands, and I also can kind of help them better work with him. I can kind of
uh-huh.
I'll do a reading, but then I'll kind of do a little mention about okay. But
Yes.
I do notice, for example, anybody he sent to me initially had the same hand shape he did. So a lot of,
Ah,
birds of a feather, like
uh-huh.
film producers tend to have like longer palms but short fingers
Mm.
because they have to just get things done. They're not as detailed. I mean, their finance people and their lawyers tend to have the longer fingers, but a lot of film producers are like, let's get her done, let's get her done. And it was fascinating where that's why I also was saying too, I didn't know that. And then I started working with families where I've done family trees by hand.
Hmm.
Oh,
And
wow.
because I never saw that in mine, because I never,
Sure.
it's something that's not written about, but your hands are genetic. I mean,
Yes.
you are receiving your family tree in your hand shape and
I
in your
have my mother's
fingerprints.
hands for sure.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes, my
Yeah.
mother's hands as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember that scene from Beaches where they're looking through the pictures, and if you see the original with Bette Midler, I remember there's a scene where the mother is dying and she's got her box of pictures, and the little girl finds one. She goes, "Oh, I've got your hands."
Hmm.
Yeah.
Or your mother's hands, and she's looking, and it really is genetic. And I do remember yeah, so it's very, that's what's so, and so I'm seeing that too, where there is you could literally see who takes after you
Oh,
Mhm.
wow.
physically in hands. Because one child will have take after, like, for example, before, right, with Prince Harry, I was watching the Royals. When I started reading, I played a game every day, especially during COVID, where I was ramping up my skills, kind of getting back into hand reading, where I'd kind of been self-taught, and this
Mhm.
time I was going all in. And so I played a game now with high definition television or computer
Oh, wow.
screens. Anytime I see a celebrity or someone who's interesting, I would screenshot their hand and start studying them. And I did notice it was interesting. If you look at Harry, his hands are nothing like his family's. His hands are exactly like his mother's.
Oh,
Where
Ah.
Prince Charles has really short, stubby, like kind of Earth-shaped hands, just like on
Mhm.
his side, just like his father. Andrew has very similar hands, and then Lady Di had these, or Princess Diana had these beautiful long fingers, and actually Harry has longer fingers
Mhm.
so he is the odd man out.
oh,
Um,
wow.
so, and it is funny, speaking of hands, and this is not political, this is just a size issue. But for example, one thing you do pay attention to when reading hands is the relative size or shape of the hand to the height of the person.
Mhm.
So really big hands on a smaller person tend to be someone who's very detailed, and the vice versa is someone who's more of a big picture thinker and an idea person, but not necessarily someone who can execute.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And it's funny because Trump is, I guess, a tall guy, but he has little tiny hands. And someone at Madame Tussaud had taken years. This is when he was
Oh,
running for election in
uh-huh.
2016, and they did something called Trump My Hand. And I wonder if it's still out there on the internet, where they actually did a scale, put a ruler next to the hand, and mocked out, and they could show, like, he just has very small hands. My hands are larger than Trump's, and I'm 5'4".
Oh, wow.
So it's really fun. It's really funny,
Yeah.
so hands again, that's something that people will show you.
Mhm.
That's something. And so that's what you're missing out on the screen, though. For example, Zoom, you don't get to see someone's hands. You don't get to see
That's true.
that piece.
Well, I will
Yeah.
tell you, it's something that I have noticed about myself is that I have pretty large hands, not only for my size, but for a woman. Like you can't really see relatively that much, but not that I'm expecting you to read my hand, but just to kind of show you, I have long hands. They're not like really bulky, but I mean, at the same time, they're not super slight. I think I have artist hands, but that being said, I will do hand measuring with other guys that I know I work with, and almost always I have hands that are like equal in size to them, which they're like, oh wow, like they didn't notice how large my hands were. I'm like, yes, I can palm a lot of things really well.
Oh, there you go. There you
Hold a
go.
bottle of champagne
Yes.
effortlessly.
I've done it where I've poured a magnum from the butt of the bottle one-handed. Yes, I
Oh,
can do that. But yeah, that was something
yeah.
that I've always noticed. And I first noticed it in my body shots for ballet when you're in a position, you have your arm as being a part of it, that it kind of my arms and then my hands by extension helps to make me look longer and taller than I was in order to, but you could really
Oh,
see it in the
beautiful.
pictures, like how long my hands were in comparison to the rest of my
But I
body.
bet it looks beautiful in a shot when you've got usually your hand kind of disappears under your arm when some of
Yes.
the, I said that would actually be quite elegant. Plus, also, for example, a dancer who used his hands intentionally was Michael Jackson.
Hmm.
I don't know if you remember,
Mhm.
he used to put tape on his fingertips.
Hmm.
And initially I thought it was something with his nails and vitiligo or something, but it wasn't. He actually wanted to draw attention
To his
to
hands.
his hands when he was
Oh,
dancing.
wow.
He was that intentional on stage. He knew himself. I mean, he had such stagecraft.
Yeah.
Um,
Partially
well,
the
look,
rhinestone glove, right?
and you're right. I even forgot about the glove.
Yeah.
Absolutely, is drawing attention to all the detail he's going to do with his hands and fingers.
Which is a perfect segue to my question. Do you think one of the reasons why gloves were so much a part of fashion for so long is because people were aware of what they were giving away with their hands, and it was another form of modesty or flirtation or whatever? That
Oh wow,
especially if
that'd
you're
be
talking about
interesting.
Victorian
Yeah, that might be. Well, I also figure there was, some of it was just having
uh,
cold houses, but yeah, I was actually there
and
might be
dirty, but
something.
yeah.
Yeah, and the dirt. Yeah, and actually, for example, I had trouble with trying to find. I was trying to do the royal family by hand, and I was really having
Mhm.
trouble once you got even though the queen. It was very hard to find pictures of her without gloves.
Mm.
Queen
Mhm.
Elizabeth, and so it was very difficult, and I can understand too, yes, you don't give as much away. Now I realize now with hand shots and what, like, because I got, Elon Musk years ago, I got all these other people and what they've given away,
Uh-huh.
by showing their hand. It's not even the palm scan with Amazon at the checkout counter at Whole Foods. This is just by your hand shape, your tendencies. It doesn't mean you're limited to that, but it's going to be, there's a pretty high probability
Well, I know
of,
when you gave me a hand reading, you looked at my hands and you were like, "Do you live by the water?" And I was like,
you got water hands.
"No." And you were like, "You have the most water hand I have ever seen."
Yes, I have.
Um,
Yes, you have this really like you have that very, very long, like that lengthy thin palm and the long thin fingers, and that is the that's actually it's interesting. I was trying to think of you know kind of like a David Bowie-esque hand with that long, but yeah, the waters, yeah, but with the water, yeah, you're that's gonna be environment's gonna be very important for you. You're not gonna the loud dinging environment, like you'll want something more beautiful, more zen, more. And I'm looking at where you are right now, your environment it's gonna make or break you. And
mm,
I have a water hand as well. Actually, I'm like fire water. I'm right in between.
okay.
I learned that later on after I talked with you, and I kept on studying that there. As I learned more and more, and I was getting books that have now been translating from Chinese, and I just
Oh,
keep on
wow.
collecting. And it is interesting because we're very much like you know there's a sensitivity, and that's this that's a
Mm,
very intuitive and empathetic hand.
mm.
um, high up at the end, but it's going to be like that water. I just realized though, I lived in Chicago and I loved it because I was right on the water. And then
Ah,
I
yeah.
lived in Ireland, moved back to Houston. Then I lived in Ireland for a couple of years. I went back and did a psychology master's right before COVID, and I lived in Cork, and I walked by two lakes on the way to school every day, and I was around nature, and then we were surrounded by
Uh-huh.
water. And I came back to landlocked Houston,
Hmm.
and I'm
Well, I
going
don't know. You
nuts,
get enough rain that it's water, right?
yeah, when the floods, and then it's funny, and then now I'm doing a lot of work in Vegas, so I find that as a water hand, I have to go take a lot of baths, so I go and I always
Mm-hmm.
make sure my hotel has a bathtub, and because I just have it's like I know you like your mermaids, I
Yeah.
have to kind of get in there, and that's just my way of getting my peace, getting
Mm-hmm.
zoning out, and chilling
Yeah.
for
Uh,
sure, absolutely.
so this is how you got into it. What what have you, I mean, it sounds like you've taken it so far beyond just I can read your palm to I can do 10,000 different kinds of analyses. So what has been maybe the most surprising thing that you have discovered that you can learn about people through their hands?
Yeah, I think some of it was the family traits where
Mm-hmm.
I've matched it up. We can literally look at, which child tends to take after someone,
Mm-hmm.
in personality by
Mm-hmm.
their hands. And the other one too is the other thing is skin. That's something interesting where your skin texture is very important. And I learned
Mm-hmm.
that where so for example, we've heard of people who are thick skinned,
Yeah.
so people tend to have more they might not even be lifting weights. It just might be their natural skin texture is a little rougher. They can take more fast-paced environments. They're going to want more action-oriented. They will not be as rattled by environments. And, versus like if you get, then the next step down is an area. So there's fire skin, which is a little bit more, again, a little, I know the hardest is earth. That's like, construction worker kind of hands. And then there's
Mm-hmm.
fire. And again, this is not due to getting calluses. This is just your natural skin texture.
Uh-huh.
The lines are really easy to read, but then when you start getting, then there's air, which is something a lot of writers, a lot of people in media have. That's kind of like, I think, I in academia, it's mostly air. But for example, a friend of mine works in the military, and it's mostly fire.
Mm-hmm.
But that has more to do. It's almost like your moon sign in astrology. And then the
Mm.
next one, of course, is water. So, for example, if you see someone whose skin is like silk, they can also have water skin. So, not only do you have a certain shaped hand, but your skin, and the skin, I think, is some of the easiest to spot, even from across the table. And you
Mm.
just know, for example, like someone who had, so that was kind of surprising where I didn't understand that. So, I did a whole team building. I've done actually a lot of team building just around skin texture
Oh my
because I can look
gosh.
over. Yeah. I had a really cool I worked with a couple groups from TikTok, and it was amazing where just online, we never met, they just sent me
Mhm.
pictures of their skin texture and some prints so you can see it. And it's interesting who gravitates towards a certain kind of job and who's going to be the sensitive person on their team. And if you go have a
Mm.
facial, your facialist will have water skin
Mhm. I can
because
see that.
these are people who want a very zen environment who are also dealing with, plus they're also working with probably,
Yeah, their
glycolic
hands are very,
acids and
very moisturized. Yes.
they're more, they're almost like wet, like they're almost kind of just, this beautiful kind of silky skin, but also almost feels like wet under like,
Mhm.
Mhm.
but I did notice it in certain environments, or people who work with neonates, a
Mm.
lot of, so they're just these very, that it's amazing what you see. And then in entertainment, I've noticed just a lot of like event producers, a lot of people. I work with a lot of people in entertainment and a lot of people who really do well in these fast-paced, crazy environments have the fire skin.
Okay.
But that was what was surprising is something that I never, what we've learned in what's coming over now is, in the US, what was available to us was mainly the big one that a lot of people learn in the US, probably in the last 20 years, has been through the Unger system, which is using fingerprints,
Mhm.
Mhm.
which is very legitimate, but that's one way. And
Mhm.
then there's the Eastern method, the what you'd probably see in India, the Vedic method, which is using the planets in the hand readings.
Mhm.
So your
Oh,
fingers would be, your index finger would be Jupiter, your middle finger would be Saturn, then it would go to Apollo, the arts finger, the ring finger, so the pinky would be Mercury, of course, the communication, and the naughty finger and the sexual fingers. But these are all correlating to gods, and then the mounts. But a lot of them coordinate. It goes in a lot of the Vedic. They also some of them that correlate with astrology, of course.
mhm.
And they might be a little bit more, I say, deterministic about their.
Mm, mhm.
But it's really cool. And that's how I learned, is because my books came through. And then the other one that where it's harder to find information on is the Buddhist version, or the elemental reading, which
Mm.
is using just the four elements:
Mhm.
earth, earth, air, fire, water, to apply to each thing. So you can have, your, instead of having a Jupiter finger, it would be your water finger. The
Gotcha.
Saturn finger would be the earth finger, and then your skin, earth. So everything has, and I think that's a little easier. It's something I've just kind of come to know. And I'd also bought a lot of books from China that just been translated, and I just through my collection. And
Mhm.
actually, during COVID, it's one thing that really helped is a lot of people sold off their collections. So I was able to. I sold my house a few years ago, and I just started buying up all these, rare books,
Uh-huh.
where I could see this. But I think that elemental system, I think, is a little easier to use with clients,
Mhm.
because people understand what the elements are. You don't have to do another layer. Although I'm a mythology nerd and am all in for Vedic. So,
That is amazing. There's
yeah,
just so much knowledge that you have. It's almost like, when are
yeah.
you gonna write a book or open a school or
Yeah,
start
yeah. Like I got,
transmitting this in
yeah.
some
That's
way?
right.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
I
I could use some
volunteer.
advice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, here's the other thing that surprised me is how few people there are out there who do this.
Mhm.
Mm.
Because and the reason being, it's easier to find, to learn astrology or find a good mentor because there are more people out there.
Yeah,
Mhm.
And
true.
it seems that this is, that chirology or hand reading is really big in the UK. And I was trying to think of South Africa, New Zealand, just anywhere, it's just, and of course, India's can be huge, or Egypt,
Mhm.
or any of but in the US, not as much.
Mhm.
And it really is a true art because it's not, there's so many. It's like learning your languages. I mean, Suzanne, you right?
Mm.
Um, it's like there's so many different layers to look at. So not only
Mhm.
do you learn the pieces, but then how do you counsel people? How do you put it together? And that's where mentoring would be very helpful.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And I had to go. My mentors were books. For
Mm.
many years, and during COVID, some of the best hand readers in the world, who couldn't have face-to-face readings, finally started teaching online, or I just said, "Can you tutor me?"
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
And so I found people who I've been following, and I would study with them, and it was actually how I ended up. I would say I did face-to-face workshops before COVID, and suddenly I couldn't. And
Mm.
I actually made my living reading hands online during COVID.
Nice.
It paid for my house for 2 years. So I
Yeah.
was,
That's amazing.
yeah, because people started, people were looking for their next step. And then I was very lucky where people wanted more experiential gifts. And
Mm.
a friend of mine said, "Hey, I wanted to give some unique gifts for Christmas. Do you do
Mhm.
gift cards?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure I do." And
Why not?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, I do.
I was like, "That's the ticket." And so I probably made some of those god awful looking gift cards you've ever seen, but I put them out there, and then that spread. And I would say, yeah. So that's the other thing that was interesting is how many people I record our sessions,
Mhm.
just video and everything. And what's the other thing that surprised me is how many people share it with. They don't just talk about it;
Mm.
they get online and they'll show their sisters or family
Mhm.
and people, and they'll rewatch it multiple times.
Mhm.
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 And it's beautiful to hear that, and then I'll come back years later, how many people will, it's referrals, but yeah, my sister was showing me this video, and I went, "'Cause some of these things are very personal."
Yes.
So
Yeah.
that's what kind of surprised me as well, but I think it's such a neat experience when you're seen, and
Mm.
there are fewer of us out there who do what I do.
Mhm.
So you were talking about medical, and I know that when you and I met, you correctly identified that I was very depleted and
For
kind of
that.
how to be able to tell in my hands. And you were one of the first sort of natural alternative people who I interacted with who was like, you need to find joy like in your life and water, joy and
Mm.
water.
Yes.
And
Yep.
it was very, very helpful at a time where I felt incredibly frustrated with what was going on with my health. And so you were talking about what you can understand medically. And obviously, for anybody, a gentle listener, this has nothing to do, these are not like, there are no doctors here, okay? So don't
Mhm.
No,
take
no.
this as medical advice.
Yeah.
But it was a great insight. And so, what are some of the insights that you can get?
Medically from hands or just.
Yes.
And actually, well, I noticed it was interesting, and thank you, because it's something I wanted to study more of. I just wanted to make sure that, yeah, I'm not giving medical advice. One teacher said, "Don't do it."
Yeah.
With hands, I will say that's, I also noticed with my dad, for example, you can tell. That's one thing I noticed when Prince Charles was sick before it was announced, because I've been watching his hands for years, because I was,
Hmm.
training myself on media, and I was actually watching. I noticed they started getting redder and really swollen.
Yeah.
If you look at how
Uh,
red his hands are, and he's like, "Oh, they're always that way." No, they're not. They've always been kind of sausagey, but not like that. So I figured something was off.
okay.
But for example, Suzanne, I remember just top. God, it was a while back. You were my early days. That when, for example, that area around your thumb is kind of like that mushy part. When that kind of
Hmm.
flattens out, that's usually when people. I noticed actually a lot of people during COVID had that,
Hmm.
either through depression or just lack of exercise, or also just like when you're sick. When you're sick, your hands will show you first. You're pale. They just don't have. And it's interesting how your mounts on your hands. Like those little puffy areas under your fingers,
Hmm.
they'll flatten out,
Yeah,
and
that
then
was what you were commenting on, and it was just
yeah,
like, "That's completely
yeah,
flat." That's
yeah,
Now I'm looking at my hands.
yeah.
yeah. Everyone who's listening is now looking at their
Looking
Yeah,
at
hands.
their hands. Yes.
Don't
absolutely.
look
And
at
I
your
think
hands
the
while
other one,
driving.
absolutely. And there's so many pieces of it, but then again, the coloring in the hands. But if you flip the hands, your nails probably show more than anything else.
Mm.
So now, like if they are, when I actually noticed, or my dad, again, I noticed when his
Mhm.
hands turned very purple and red, I knew it was time to, we need to go to the ER. There's something, this, heart issues.
Mhm.
But the nails, look at the ridges when your nails break easily, like when you
Mhm.
get those vertical ridges,
Mhm.
Right.
that's stress. That is like either, that's it's kind of like the spine and stress. So I notice if you ever notice they kind of your nails finally start getting little ridges in when you never had them, it's not from washing the dishes. This is periods of stress, and they'll become more fragile. They'll just kind of break off. So your
Yes, that's
nails again let you know what's going on in terms of it's not the chemicals you're using. It's and the other it was interesting with for example, Marilyn Monroe. And again, this is when I was looking at hands. Once I'd
mhm.
studied some health indicators, like there's one about liver, and there's like a like a gray line going through your hand, or going through your fingernail is usually a sign, because your nails actually also mark your health
Mm.
over time. It's like having, what is it, those time lapse lenses,
Oh, wow.
where, it takes a while for your nail to grow out, and that is showing your health at the time. If it was kind of spooned in for a while, that could be, like a potassium issue. Or the other one I found too is I kept on getting these. What was it? Where was mine? Oh, the other one was, fingerprints. This is something interesting. Do you know that if you ever try to go through and use clear or scan your fingerprints, or if you're trying to at the airport, or if
Mhm.
a lot of people who have cancer lose their fingerprints, in terms of they're still there, but the skin it's harder to read.
Oh, wow.
Mhm.
So a lot of people are going through clear, and they can't get their finger scanned. They can only use their eyes.
Nice. Interesting.
No,
It's
my
because
Apple phone and nothing Apple ever recognizes my fingerprint.
Yeah.
that's probably why.
Yeah.
And also it's like as you get older, or if you use like a lot of, I would say fruit acids or whatever, depending. But for me, it's very hard to print me. I've
Mm.
always had trouble, just because also I think Suzanne, you and I have very similar kinds of hands. We have like the
Mhm.
water hands. You tend to have very, very fine lines.
Mhm.
And so I had to buy, FBI kits to print myself with. You had to really, viscous, whatever, because it picks up on the details. And even then, it's really hard to print me. But I did
Ah.
notice, for example, yeah, that as we age, also if you're menopausal, you tend, it's like losing your tires, like the
Mhm.
when the
The
they start
tread.
getting a little bald, the
Yeah.
tread. That someone's like, oh yeah, I remember I was sitting with somebody, and they were not very, subtle, and I was like, yeah, okay, I get it. But the
So hopefully the ending didn't seem too abrupt there for you all. As mentioned, technical problems before. I think also the at that time we had some technical problems. There was a whole other section to this interview that unfortunately
Got eaten.
got eaten. Yes. So we would love to have her back on the show. And
As soon as we can all get our schedules coordinated, we will.
yes,
Until then, thank you for joining us on this special episode of All the Woo.
A to Z.